On the last afternoon of an empire, 50,000 people stand in the summer heat outside the great southern gate of the imperial city of Hue. It is August 30th, 1945. A 31-year-old man in golden robes and a yellow turban reads a short document aloud, then lifts a block of solid gold weighing more than 10 kilograms and places it in the hands of a delegate of the revolution, a man in a plain shirt. The imperial flag comes down. A red flag goes up. 143 years of the Nguyen dynasty end in a single gesture. The man in the robes will die in a Paris apartment, but the block of gold is just beginning its journey, and it will take 78 years to come home. Look closer at the object, because the object is the story. It is a seal, the Great Golden Seal of the Emperors of Vietnam. It was cast in 1823 on the orders of Minh Mang, the second emperor of the dynasty, a ruler who wanted his authority pressed in gold onto every document that mattered. The casting was recorded to the day in the court chronicles. His court produced an entire fleet of seals over the years, more than 100 across the dynasty, cut from gold, silver, jade, ivory, even a fallen meteorite. But this one stood above them all. The finished seal was the largest the dynasty would ever make, a square base of pure gold crowned with a coiling dragon, its head raised, staring straight ahead. Its inscription translates as the treasure of the emperor. For 122 years, it was touched only by imperial hands, reserved for the most important decrees of the state, passed down through 12 reigns like the throne itself, made portable. Whoever held the seal held the mandate to rule, which is exactly why, in 1945, it had to be given away in public. And here is a strange forensic detail to carry with you. Nobody at that ceremony could agree what the thing actually weighed. One official who organized the handover swore it was 10 kilograms of pure gold. The delegate who received it claimed only 7. Another witness said 5. A woman of the court who held it later insisted it was nearly 13. For most objects, that would not matter. For this one, the confusion would follow it around the world because for the next 77 years, almost nobody who mattered would get the chance to put it on a scale. That summer, Vietnam was starving and burning. The Japanese occupation was collapsing. A famine had killed people by the hundreds of thousands, and revolution was moving through the country faster than news of it. The last emperor was named Bao Dai, and he was an unlikely final act. The only son of his father, he had been sent to school in Paris at age 10, crowned in absence as a boy of 12, and finished his French education before ever truly ruling. He spoke better French than ceremonial Vietnamese, played tennis, drove sports cars, and reigned over a colony that treated his throne as furniture. When the revolution demanded that throne, he did not fight for it. Days before the ceremony, he had written that he would rather live as a citizen of an independent country than reign as king of an enslaved one. So he stood at the gate before rows of schoolgirls in white and a military band, read out his own abdication, and handed the seal and a jeweled golden sword to the new government's delegate. In return, they pinned a citizen's badge on his chest. The Emperor of Vietnam walked away as plain citizen Vinh Thuy. The seal traveled north to Hanoi within a day, and on September 2nd, it sat near the platform where independence was declared to the world. The empire was gone. The seal had a new owner, the people. Therefore, it should have gone into a museum and stayed there. Instead, war came back. In late 1946, French forces returned to reclaim their former colony and closed in on Hanoi. The officials guarding the seal and the sword could not carry 10 kilograms of gold into the jungle, so they hid both inside the wall of an old temple on the edge of the city and withdrew. For 6 years, the mandate of heaven sat bricked into a ruin. And then it was found by accident. French soldiers tearing the temple apart for building bricks broke open the wall and pulled out a golden dragon. That detail is worth sitting with. The most important object in Vietnam was rediscovered by men looking for construction material. What the French did next was pure theater. In March of 1952, in the hill city of Dalat, they staged a formal ceremony and handed the seal and sword back to their newly appointed chief of state. The man receiving them was Bao Dai, the same man. He had surrendered the seal to a revolution, and now a colonial army was handing it back to him as a costume for a government that answered to Paris. He accepted. 3 years later, a rigged referendum removed him from power entirely, and he left for France for good. The seal went with the family. Then came the long silence. For 4 decades, the golden seal of Vietnam sat in private rooms in France, while the country it belonged to fought 2 wars, reunified, and rebuilt. Bao Dai grew old in exile, and the exile was not gilded. The man who had owned palaces lived out his final years in a modest Paris apartment, short of money, selling off the scattered pieces of a vanished life one by one. Somehow, through all of it, the seal stayed. He died in Paris in July of 1997, and his will left his French possessions, the seal among them, to his last wife, a Frenchwoman named Monique Baudot. The sword had already taken a separate road through the Crown Prince's hands, and it has never come home. For another quarter century, the seal stayed behind her door. In September of 2021, she died, and the seal effectively vanished. No museum knew where it was. Almost nobody was looking. 13 months later, it surfaced in the worst possible way. In October of 2022, a Paris auction house published a catalog of 329 lots, and there, photographed like any other antique, sat the treasure of the emperor, lot number 101. Estimated value, a few million euros. The lot before it, a golden bowl made for an earlier Nguyen emperor, sold for 680,000 euros to the highest bidder. The seal was days away from the same fate. A national symbol hammered off to an anonymous paddle number. Vietnam erupted. The descendants of the dynasty, organized as a family council, wrote directly to the President of France, saying they were shocked to see the treasures of their ancestors traded like ordinary objects of gold. The Vietnamese government moved through every channel at once. Diplomats, culture officials, the embassy in Paris, even the halls of UNESCO, arguing that a national symbol carried abroad in the wreckage of war belonged to the country that made it, not to the highest paddle in the room. Under that pressure, the auction house postponed the sale once, then twice, each delay buying only days. But a postponement is not a rescue. The heirs still owned the seal under French law. The auction house still held a mandate to sell, and every week of delay risked the lot quietly returning to the calendar. Therefore, the endgame had to be a purchase, not a protest. Behind the scenes, a quieter solution took shape. A private Vietnamese collector, a businessman named Nguyen The Hong, stepped forward with state backing to buy the seal directly before it could ever reach the auction floor. The contract was signed in January for 6.1 million euros, and the state made him sign something else too, a written pledge that after a period in his own museum, the seal would pass to the nation for good. On November 16, 2023, in a ceremony at the Vietnamese Embassy in Paris, the golden seal was formally handed over, 78 years after a young emperor gave it away at a palace gate. Today, it sits behind glass in a private museum in northern Vietnam, guarded, studied, and finally weighed without dispute. The scale ended a 77-year argument, 10.78 kilograms of pure gold. And notice the small poetry of the ending. The seal of the Nguyen dynasty was carried home by a man whose own family name is Nguyen, the most common name in Vietnam, the name of millions. In a sense, the dynasty did not buy its treasure back. The people it was surrendered to did. There is one more number that closes the file. Under Minh Mang, the court cast 14 great seals of gold and jade, and through every war and revolution since, 13 of them never left the country. They sit together today in the National Museum in Hanoi. Only one ever crossed the ocean, the largest, the one that carried the mandate itself. It was the only one that needed rescuing, and it is the last one that came home. The emperors themselves left no throne to reclaim. Their descendants live scattered across 4 continents. Private citizens with a famous name and no crown, and no serious movement exists to restore one. What survived was not the family's power. It was the object that once carried it. One block of gold that outlasted an empire, a colonial war, an exile, and an auction catalog. Stand at the great southern gate of Hue today, and tourists stream through where 50,000 once stood in silence, and no permission is required. The dynasty fell in a single afternoon. The seal took 78 years to finish the journey home, and it is the only member of the court that ever did. Subscribe to the Seized Crown, because every fallen dynasty leaves a trail of gold, and the next file is already open on the desk.